The following podcast is brought to you by the Bridge Bible Church.
For more information, please visit us online
at thebridgewired.com.
Yeah, I'm back up on the stage, and because we added some chairs back in anticipation for tomorrow to be a little bit more full. It's Christmas Eve services tomorrow at 3 and 5. So if you're in town, let me just invite you right now to come and continue worshiping with us and be with us for one of those services as we just celebrate together the coming of our Savior Jesus Christ. But if you're out of town, let me just say Merry Christmas. I'm glad you're with us this morning. But I'm back up here because if we have people show up, which like we anticipate, I've been told several times, Pastor Rob, I really like you down on the floor. It's really nice, but, I can't see you. I'm a short guy, and I get it. I get lost when I get down on the floor. So maybe, I don't know, I'll get a little box or something down there later. But for now, I'll be up here on the stage. And we are in the second of our three-part series, and it's our Christmas series, and it's called A Thrill of Hope. It's there on the screen. And last week, what we talked about was that exact expression, or that thrill of hope that comes in the promises of God, the promise that God made to us that he would send one to us, namely Jesus Christ, who would save us from sin and save us from death, and that we would have new life in him. And so we looked at that, and today what we're going to look at is the wisdom of God. And so when you think about the Bible and you think about wisdom, who comes to mind? Solomon, right? Yeah, right. But that's not who we're talking about because it's Christmas. So we got to talk about the wise guys. We got to talk about the three wise men and we don't know if it was three. That's kind of become tradition. I believe it's more than three, but we have to think about these wise men that show up in the Gospel of Matthew. And so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to look at the Gospel of Matthew. We're going to look at these wise men, and we're going to ask some questions about who they are and where did they come from and why did they even come. So reading out of Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 2, verses 1 through 10, this is what we read. Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him. And when Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all the chief priests and the scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. And they told him, in Bethlehem of Judea. For so it is written by the prophet, And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. Then Herod summoned the wise men secretly and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word, that I too may come and worship him. After listening to the king, they went on their way, and behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. I don't know about you, but it was probably, for me, maybe about 10, 11 years ago or so, I was reading this story, and it just kind of just bugged me a little bit. Like, who are these guys? Why would they even look for a Jewish Messiah? I mean, they're not Jews. These are guys from the east coming to Jerusalem looking for a Jewish king. Like, who are these Magi? Like, why would they come? And why would they even care to look for a king or a ruler that on the surface has nothing to do with them? But here they are. They're in this gospel account. And so I wanted to look and see what they were doing and why they had come. And so I think as we look through this a little bit deeper today, we're going to see that God's wisdom really comes through as to what he was doing. So let's look at Daniel chapter 2. This is where we first meet the Magi in the Old Testament. They appear here. It says, in the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams, and his spirit was troubled, and his sleep left him. Then the king commanded that the magicians, and that's the Magi, the magicians, the enchanters, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans be summoned to tell the king his dreams. So they came in and stood before the king, and the king said to them, I had a dream, and my spirit is troubled to know the dream. Now, this is a really interesting situation because at this time, Nebuchadnezzar had taken the Jews captive, and he'd taken all the choice men and workers and everybody that was of value. He took them out of Jerusalem and out of Judea, and he brought them into his country, and Daniel is a part of this. And so he's having these dreams now, and he says, I'm troubled, I can't sleep, I want to know what this is about. And so he summons all of his wise men and everyone in his kingdom who potentially could answer this question of, what does my dream mean? Now, you would think that they have a pretty good shot at it. It's like, okay, well, tell me what your dream is, and I'll give you an interpretation. And there'd probably be like a whole bunch of interpretations. But Nebuchadnezzar doesn't make anything easy. No, he makes it actually exceedingly difficult for anybody to give him the interpretation, because here's what he says to them. In 2:1-3, or in 2:5-6, he says, and the king answered to the Chaldeans. So what did he answer them? They said, well, tell us the dream, O king, and we'll tell you what it means. And this is what he says to them. The word from me is firm. If you do not make known to me the dream and its interpretation, you shall be torn limb from limb, and your house shall be laid in ruins. But if you show me the dream and its interpretation, you shall receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. Therefore, show me the dream and its interpretation. He just put this in the realm of the impossible. He says, no, it's not that easy. I'm having these dreams, and they're really troubling, and I can't sleep. Because every time I sleep, I have this dream, and it just keeps me awake. So here's what you have to do. Since you guys are the sages and the wise men and the ones who know everything, you have to tell me the dream. I'm not going to tell you what I'm dreaming. You tell me what I'm dreaming, and then you tell me what it means. Oh, and by the way, if you can't do it, I'm going to tear you limb from limb and destroy your house. That's pretty rough, right? It's like, nobody can do this. No one can do this. This is beyond human capability. But what we see is that Daniel has a vision from God in the night. And what does God do? He says, Daniel, here's the dream I'm giving Nebuchadnezzar. And he lays it all out before him. And Daniel sees the dream, and then God gives him the interpretation of the dream. And so Daniel comes before King Nebuchadnezzar, and he tells him all that he had been dreaming, and then he tells him all that it meant. And we don't want to get bogged down in the weeds of the dream, but what happens is this, that Nebuchadnezzar makes a decree. He is amazed at what Daniel has done. And so in Daniel chapter 2, verses 46 and 48, he says this. Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and paid homage to Daniel, and commanded that an offering and incense be offered up to him. And the king answered and said to Daniel, truly, your God is God of gods and Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries, for you have been able to reveal this mystery. Then the king gave Daniel high honors and many great gifts. And now watch this. And made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon and chief prefect over all the wise men of Babylon. So Daniel is now placed over the Magi. He is now placed as their boss. He's given authority to be over them. And he is going to do what? He's going to start talking about this king, this God who has revealed dreams and reveals mysteries. He's going to start speaking to them about who God is. And do you think they're going to accept it? I don't know. Probably not at first. Anybody ever get a new boss on the job? Like, everything seems to be going okay, and then all of a sudden maybe there's a change, or maybe somebody just says, I'm retiring, and they promote somebody, but you get a new boss. You ever been in that situation? And then all of a sudden, everybody's kind of like in this weird moment of, well, what do we do with this guy? What do we do with this gal? I don't know. Like, I'm just going to watch. I'm going to see what this person does as my new boss, because I don't know if I'm going to take everything that they say right away. Like, I want to know that they're competent. I want to know that this was a good choice. It's like, I'm still part of the bigger team, but I want to make sure that this isn't just something I'm just going to follow, and then in a month they're going to replace this person and give me another boss because maybe they don't like this boss. So I'm just going to wait. And I think the Magi are probably in the same boat. I think they're sitting here thinking, why should we follow this God? It's like, it's great that Daniel's God reveals mysteries and he could tell Nebuchadnezzar something that we couldn't do. Okay, I get it. But at the same time, we're not Jews. We're not like Daniel. This is his thing. So we'll just watch, right? Yeah, he's over us, but we'll just watch. And so why would they follow him even further? And why would they go and want to listen? Well, I'm glad you asked that question because I asked that question. And there's two more events that show up in the book of Daniel that I think really draw in the Magi to a place where they start to really comprehend and understand, so that we see in the Gospel of Matthew that they would be looking for a Messiah. So the next event that we read is about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now, these were also Jewish men that were pulled out of their home country and brought into captivity, and they were placed among the exiles, and Nebuchadnezzar created this gold statue. He says, and every time the trumpets blow and the cymbals are done and we make the big hoo-ha and all that stuff, you guys are supposed to bow down and worship this big gold statue. And these three men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, said, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to worship this statue because we worship the living God. We don't worship idols. And he says, well, if you don't worship, the next time we do it, I'm going to throw you into a furnace and burn you up. How do you like that? And they said, well, I hope you don't do it again because, we're not going to worship. Well, sure enough, the trumpets sound and the gongs are going and it's time to worship, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they don't bow down. And so Nebuchadnezzar becomes greatly enraged, and he seizes them, has them arrested, brings them, and throws them in a fiery furnace. Not just a furnace, but he says, make this thing super hot. In fact, it was so hot, it kills the two soldiers when they finally open it up to throw them in. So the two soldiers standing at the door of the furnace lose their life as they stoke this fire so hot. And they throw these three men in, and Nebuchadnezzar says, well, what's happening? And they're like, they're not burning up. They're in there, and in fact, there's a fourth person in that furnace, and he's shining like the sun, and there's nothing happening. They're in there just talking to one another. And so Nebuchadnezzar becomes greatly disturbed by all of it, and he says, hey guys, come out of the furnace. I want to talk to you. And they come out, and he sees that God has spared their life. And so then in Daniel chapter 3, verses 28 and 29, he makes this decree, or he makes this statement. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said, blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants, who trusted in him and set aside the king's command and yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I make a decree, any people, nation, or language that speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses laid in ruins. For there is no other God who is able to rescue in this way. Now, Nebuchadnezzar really has a thing about tearing people limb from limb and destroying their houses. I don't know what it is, but that seems to be his go-to. Like, I'm just going to punish you, tear you limb from limb, destroy your house, But what does he say here? He says, their God is able to save, and no other God can save like this. He says, no one should speak anything ill against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Well, whose God is this? It's Daniel's God. It's the same God who gave the mysteries to Daniel and revealed them to Daniel. And so now the Magi are told by King Nebuchadnezzar, not only is Daniel over you, but the God of Daniel, the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, he is to be honored and followed and not to be spoken against. And so now I think the Magi are probably thinking, well, okay, Daniel, tell us about this God, because not only did he help you, but now Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego have been saved from the fiery furnace, and we have seen the power of your God. We have seen him work and move and deliver. And so now they want to know the mysteries. And Daniel starts revealing to them things that God has shown him. And one of the things God has shown Daniel is that a Messiah is to come. There is one to come and save and deliver. And so they're learning all of this. Well, Nebuchadnezzar's reign ends and the kingdoms change hands. And on the scene comes a cat by the name of Darius. And Daniel is still serving in this high exalted position. Now, when there's a changeover and you have new people come in, what typically happens? Well, there's a little bit of a power struggle, right? Like, okay, we got to sort out who's really in charge here. And so under a new king and you have a changeover, they're thinking, we don't like this Daniel guy. We don't like him because he's in charge and, his time is done. Nebuchadnezzar's done. Daniel should be done. It's our time. Let's get rid of him. What do we do? Well, let's trick King Darius to make a decree that if Daniel keeps praying, then we can throw him into the lion's den. And that's exactly what they do. So they trick the king, and he has Daniel thrown into the den of lions. And Darius is greatly upset by this because he loves Daniel. He respects him, and he doesn't want him to be killed, but he's thinking, I've made a decree, I have to throw him in there. So he throws him into the den, and God delivers Daniel that night from the lions. And so when Darius comes the next day, he has Daniel brought out of the lion's den, and then those guys who are filled with jealousy, he has them thrown in, and not just them, their families thrown in too. And the lions devour those who were trying to overthrow Daniel's position. And then he says this in Daniel 3, verses 28 and 29. Then King Darius wrote to all the people, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree that in all my royal dominion, people are to tremble in fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed, and his dominion shall be to the end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. He who has saved Daniel from the power of the lions, so this Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. And so we see that this event also establishes God in the sight of the Magi. So the Magi, the wise men who carried over from Nebuchadnezzar's reign to now Darius's reign, are all under Daniel, and they see the hand of God. They see Daniel's God move, and Daniel is discipling these men about who God is, the one true God, and that he will bring one to deliver his people. A king will be born to the Jews who will be the King of Kings. And so these men, these astrologers, are starting to hear this, and they learn these things, and they start looking for signs. See, they're astrologers, so they watch the heavens and they look for signs, and they want to know what is it that has brought this about. So they look in the heavens and they look for signs and wonders to come. And then we see this in Matthew chapter 2, verse 2. It says, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." And isn't that beautiful? Like, this is a couple generations out from Daniel. And a couple of generations later, the Magi are looking for signs in the heavens that would show that Daniel's God is faithful and true, that he will bring this one. And a star arises, and they say, that's it. The king has been born. Let's go. And so they go to follow the star and see who this king is to come and worship. Now, before we move much further, I want you to know that this is not all that God is doing during this time. Because let's think about it. We have the Gospel of Matthew and the Magi show up. Well, what's not there during the time of Daniel? Well, there's no Jerusalem. It's been destroyed. It's been torn down. The temple is gone. There's nothing there. It's been laid waste. And so during this time, like, everything has been destroyed, and yet Daniel is preparing Magi to come see a king who will be born, King of the Jews in Jerusalem, and will be born in Bethlehem, specifically. So what happens? Well, God is working, and his wisdom shows through here. In Daniel chapter 9, we read that Daniel is older in age, and he's going back over what God has said to his people, and he realizes, hey, we're near the end of 70 years of being in exile. This is the time for us to return. We should return. And so he petitions the king, can our people return to Jerusalem? And Darius says yes. He has favor on them and says, you may go. He releases them. He says, you may go back. And so now you have, at this time, a group of people returning. And then in Ezra chapter 6, verses 1 through 13, Ezra petitions, and he goes back to rebuild the temple. And he goes to reestablish God's temple in Jerusalem because it has been laid waste and it is gone. And so he goes. And then Nehemiah, under the rule of Artaxerxes. Now this is not the Xerxes of Esther, but this is his son. And Nehemiah is his cupbearer. And so Artaxerxes is sitting on the throne, who would have known Esther, who God used to save the Jews from annihilation. And Nehemiah says, my city, Jerusalem, has been destroyed and the walls have been torn down. And he petitions Artaxerxes to go back and rebuild the walls. And he has favor on Nehemiah, and he says, go, rebuild the walls of your city. And so at this same time, you see that God is working through all of these different ways and all these nations, and he's bringing back people for this moment of Christmas that we celebrate the birth of a king. And he is moving. It's kind of like watching the History Channel. Like, we watch the History Channel, you see the rise and fall of nations and leaders and all these things, and it's neat, and like you can see the big picture. But if you only look at the big picture, you miss all the intricacies of what's happening in history. And God, in his wisdom, is working through history to bring about this moment where the Magi will come and say, where is the one who's been born King of the Jews? God has set this up well beforehand. And this has been his plan all along, to bring these men to come and announce the birth of Jesus. And so we see God working through history. It's a marvelous thing. Who can think of these things? Not us. This is a work of God. This is something only he could orchestrate, only that he could do. And it fulfills the promise that's made all the way back in Genesis 3:15 when he says, I will bring one out of the seed of a woman who will crush the head of a snake. And he will be your Savior. So the promise fulfilled is happening right before us all through history. It's interwoven there. So Matthew 2:2, it says that they followed the star. It says, where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star, and when it rose, we have come to worship him. I think there's something else we need to think about here, and it's the star. The star is very interesting because I started looking at it, and the star acts in some really interesting ways. It doesn't act like a real star. And so it made me wonder, what is God doing here? They follow a star. And I think what it is just a miracle in plain view. And I think it's a kind of miracle in plain view that it gets overlooked. And we say, oh, there was a star in the heaven, and they followed the stars. But I think it's more than just that. The star is a sign for the Magi. So they're looking in the heavens, and they see a star. It just appears in the heavens. Okay, that's fine. I can handle that. A star appears, but it's the sign, whatever it was, it's the sign that tips them off. Now's the time. Gather all of our stuff because we have a journey ahead. That one shows us where the King of the Jews was born. So we have to go find him. And so they gather their stuff and they go, and they follow the star, and they leave their Mede-Persian Empire region and go into the Roman Empire region. And specifically, the star leads them to Jerusalem. So they're in Jerusalem. The star is over Jerusalem. And then we read this in Matthew 2:3-8, this interaction with Herod. So it says, when Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all the chief priests and the scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. And they told him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for so it is written by the prophet, and you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, and from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. And then Herod summoned the wise men secretly and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared. He asked what time it appeared because he wants to know how old this child is. How long have you been on a journey? When did the star come up, and how long did it take you to get here? Because that's going to tell me how old this kid possibly is, this young king. And then he says this, he ascertains when the star appeared, and then he sent them to Bethlehem saying, go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word that I too may come and worship him. That's just a flat out lie. Just a flat out lie. He has no intention to worship the new king because this king has a claim to the throne. And if Herod is sitting on the throne, this king will have a claim to his throne. And if he does not rule well, Rome will remove him. And so he does not need a contender. He does not want to worship a king. He wants to dispose of a king. So he says, you go and find him, and man, you tell me because I want to worship him. I want to kill him is what he's saying. And so here they go to follow the star again. In verse 9 and 10, it says that they go out, and after listening to the king, they went on their way, and behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. And when they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. The star moves them from east to west to Jerusalem, and then from Jerusalem to the south to the house where Jesus is in Bethlehem. Stars don't do that. Stars don't move that way. It's an amazing thing to see how the star appears and how it moves. And it settles over two very different specific places as it guides them. So here's my question that I asked, and I pose it to you. Could it be the star is not a star at all, but it is actually the Shekinah glory of God? The Shekinah glory of God leading them. Shekinah in the Hebrew writing means this: the majestic presence or the manifestation of God which has descended to dwell among men. Could it be that the star itself is the light of God, the Shekinah glory of God, leading the wise men to where Jesus is to point to the actual Shekinah glory dwelling among men, and that is Jesus Christ himself? The light leading us to the true light. And so here we have this interaction between the Magi and the star, and I think it's a beautiful picture, and it's not one that we can just say, well, that's weird, because we see it in Exodus. God does the same thing. In Exodus 13, 21 and 22, this is what we read there. And the Lord went before them. This is as his people are leaving Egypt and coming to the promised land, and he's guiding them through the desert, and it says, the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud and led them along the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, and they might travel by day and by night. The pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night did not depart from before the people. That's the glory of God leading his people in Exodus. Why would he not lead the wise men in the same way? And I believe that this is what we see, is that God has led these men to where the King is, to where Christ is. There's a hymn that we sing around this time of year, traditionally called We Three Kings. And we're going to sing it now. And as we sing it, what I want you to do is just think about the verses. Think about what we're talking about here, about the Magi being prepared before him by God to come and behold him. And as we sing this hymn together, each verse talks about the gifts that the Magi brought and the significance of those gifts. And so we're going to answer that question. What did they do after they found Jesus? What did they do? They get to the house. What do? They say they want to worship. So what does that look like? What did they do? And so we're going to sing this together. We'll meditate a little bit on who these Magi are and the gifts they brought, and then we'll wrap up the message. Yeah.
Can you grab me that sheet of paper on the ground?
You need a sheet of paper on the ground. Yeah, I got it.
Thanks, bro.
You're welcome. Nobody knows. It was seamless. All right. So quickly, as we just wrap up, we see God's manifold wisdom on display in bringing the Magi the way he did and how he orchestrated it all together. And they come and they see the Christ child, and they come and they bear gifts. They come and they honor him. And I want us to look at these three gifts and just The hymn so beautifully puts what they are and what they are for. The first is gold, because he is a king. He is a real king. And the Magi, they don't go to all these different nations and all these different places to announce that a king has been born here and a king has been born there and there's another one here. They come to this king. And for them to come, this is God's way of saying, here come the nations, and they are pronouncing that this is a king above all kings, that this is King of kings and Lord of lords. This is my son who is worthy. And so they give him gold, and they proclaim him to be the one who is to reign. The next is frankincense. Now, frankincense is a different type of gift. This one is a gift that is given usually for offerings to a god. It's usually used in worship. It's used in the temples, and it is burnt, and it is giving off a fragrant aroma, and it is given as an act of worship, and they give Jesus frankincense. And what this is they're saying, not only is he an earthly king worthy of gold and worthy of his position, but he is deity, and he is worthy of worship. And so we bring him an offering of worship. Fully God, fully man. These Magi bring these two gifts. The third gift they bring, and this is the one that I think, as I picture the scene, one, it must have been very strange for Mary to open the front door, so to speak. It's like, and you open the door, and here's this entourage of all these people from the east. They're like, hey, you have a baby? And it's like, but they're here to worship. And that must have been strange, but as strange as that is, I think seeing this last gift come out, I don't know what her heart would have felt. But it's myrrh. And myrrh is a sticky resin that comes from plants. It's a substance that comes from plants, and it is used in the burial process. And it is a gift that shows why this child came. He came to die. And they give him a gift for his burial. I don't know how she treasured that in her heart and how she felt about that, but it brings out the significance of who this Jesus is. That he is a king and he is deity, but he has come to die to save man, to save us from sin and death, to give us new life, new spiritual life in him. Interestingly, we celebrate Christmas, the birth of Jesus. But the only reason we celebrate the birth of Jesus is because of his death, burial, and resurrection. Without him dying and being raised from the dead, why in the world would we even bother to celebrate his coming? It would be insignificant. It would just be another person born in a different time, and yes, he had great influence. But no, this is God in the flesh who came for man to reconcile us back, and he died for us at the cross, and he was resurrected. And because of that, we remember his incarnation. We remember his birth, and we celebrate it, and we worship. This is why Christmas is so important, because of his death. So his birth means that he is the one who came to save sinners. The last part of that hymn, they came to behold. They say, come behold him. That's the call to us, church. That have you beheld Jesus Christ? Are you beholding him? What does Christmas mean to you? Christmas is this message, is this story. This is why Matthew has the Magi there. They come and they call us who are not Jews, the Gentiles, to come and behold this king who is our king, the king of all kings, who comes to bring us new life. And they say, come, behold him now. And what do? They take a position of worship. They bow low before infant Jesus and offer him gifts. That is what we are to do this Christmas. To observe the wisdom of God and be in awe of it. And to see that we are to behold this Jesus and give him worship because he is worthy. Let's pray together.
Thank you for listening. To find out more about the Bridge Bible Church
or listen to previous podcasts, please visit thebridgewire.com.